My tourism family, I greet you well. You've made a wise decision to arm yourselves with as much information as you can regarding the robust health and safety protocols that have been established to tackle COVID-19. In these unprecedented times, knowledge is power, and your cooperation will help us to get back to normality sooner than later. Each module of this training program targets a different subsector of the tourism industry. And although some guidelines are generic, there are also sector-specific requirements. I encourage you to absorb the information as much as possible and to share with those you know, particularly the ones most impacted by these unfortunate circumstances. Your health and that of your guests is top priority. And while we want to keep everyone safe, we understand that reopening the sector is crucial for all our sustenance. This sector has been a lifesaver for so many of us, and my ministry and its agencies want to continue to contribute to that well-being. As you are aware, the global COVID-19 pandemic halted the sector for a few months. This resulted in many of our tourism workers being displaced and uncertain of their future. With this in mind, we impressed upon you to take charge of your own health and safety and those around you as we traverse this rocky road. It is said that tough times don't last, but tough people do. We are tough, we are resilient, and together we can get through this pandemic. We have learned many lessons that have paved the way for a new tourism. And with your help and in time, we will be a sector like we've never been before. Learn all you can from presentations and make the necessary changes as you go back into your workspaces. Pleasant viewing and stay safe.
And today we'll be looking at the protocols for attractions, which will cover parks, beaches, etc. So we'll be looking at the protocols for our attractions. Now, safe and resilient tourism has consistently been a foundational element of Jamaica's tourism industry. So we have always boasted a safe and resilient tourism. And we will continue to boast that because we are COVID resilient. We are going out there and we're COVID resilient. We're trying to be as safe as possible so when our visitors get here, they will have a good and safe and relaxing experience of our island. Tourists and Jamaicans alike have high expectations for Jamaica as a top Caribbean tourist destination, and we have to maintain that. We have high expectations for our country as a tourism destination. Our visitors do have high expectations of our country. And so we have to go out there and continue to provide that service, to provide that safe destination for our visitors. So we have to continue with business. We have to do so safely. These protocols, they take into account the health, the safety, and well-being of our tourists, our employees, and the communities in which we live. We seek to reduce the risk of exposure to COVID-19 while promoting an enjoyable and relaxing experience. So we still want them to come here. We still want them to enjoy our island and relax, but we have to maintain safety and we have to maintain our physical distance. The protocols are designed, as Mrs. Cookhorn said, to support the standards, a consistent standard across the industry, and the entities or agencies represented. It was a joint association, and so the Ministry of Tourism, or umbrella agency, along with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Jamaica Tourist Board, Tourism Product Development Company, and the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association developed this protocol that we were sharing. The goals and objectives of the goal of the Ministry of Tourism COVID-19 Health and Safety Protocol is to strengthen Jamaica's resilience to COVID-19 and safeguard all stakeholders within the tourism ecosystem, including workers, communities, and tourists. So our main focus is to ensure that you are safe. We want our people to be safe. You want to go out there, but practice safety, because that's very, very important. Specific objectives include providing guidance to enable consistent recovery protocols. So we're looking at consistency in terms of the recovery protocol. We will be providing the guidance and following up and working with you throughout. Support health and economic risk management across the tourism industry, and to provide that framework to drive quality assurance of implemented protocols and regular monitoring. Maximize effective recovery by facilitating and improving the flow of information and coordination, and enhance and coordinate recovery intelligence gathering and information sharing capabilities. Now, there are 8 key health and safety elements of the Jamaican tourism sector, and number 1, sanitization stations. So sanitization is very, very important. We have to keep sanitizing as we go along. Have to keep sanitizing, all right? Face mask and our personal protective equipment is a must. We have to protect ourselves using our face mask and our personal protective equipment. Physical distancing should be practiced as well, and there will be guidelines for how you do your physical distances. Clear, frequent, and consistent messaging, meaning that information has to be ongoing and it has to be consistent, you know, and clear so that all can understand. And hence, even for this session, we try to reach to you to share the information. Rather than just sharing the document, we try to reach to the different sectors and share the information with them as well. Technology enablement is another key thing too, because we have to use our technology more now than before. So some of us who were not so au fait with technology, some of us who had our smartphones but we really weren't using it smartly, we now have to utilize our smartphones in a better way and reduce paper and cash and all of those things, anything that would transmit the virus. Real-time monitoring and reporting is important, so in terms of your temperature checks and reporting any abnormality and monitoring as you go along. Rapid and clear response, so clear protocols when care is necessary for any worker, visitor, or community member, and training. Training for the entire tourism industry to help ensure workers are equipped to manage protocols based on their role. And so this is one of the series of training, because outside of us doing the general protocols to you, in your organization, there will also be training of your employees. Now, the scope for the attractions and the parks and the beaches, this protocol document, it entails a requirement for attractions, attraction parks and beaches, and include those which are part of a private hotel, privately owned or leased, or within the public domain. So we're looking at private property as well as the ones in the public domain. In terms of the responsibilities, COVID-19, there's a COVID-19 safety point person, and that's a minimum of 1 employee at any time during the opening hours of the business must be a specifically trained and designated COVID-19 safety point person. And we refer to this person as our SPP. So each property, each entity should have at least 1 SPP, 1 contact person. The SPP should conduct regular spot checks throughout the property and observe protocols being enacted. The SPP should also serve as a point of contact for employee and guest complaints, and is required to document, investigate, and triage complaints. So this person is a point of contact. They should document any kind of complaints and report it to the relevant agency. Depending on the number of employees and the job functions, the SPP can be a full-time position, or the duties can be allocated to an existing employee, such as a director, manager, or supervisor. So if it's a large property, you might also want to appoint somebody as a full-time SPP, because for a large property, you have more persons to deal with, more areas to manage. You might want to have somebody specifically assigned to conduct the duties of a SPP. Now, in terms of the things that we will need to operate safely, alcohol-based hand sanitizer is very important. As we mentioned, sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. 62% alcohol or above. Your face mask, and you should have enough that each member of staff should have at least a face mask on their shift. So every member of staff should have at least one face mask on their shift. You need your spray disinfectant or wipes. No contact handheld thermometer, and this should be a minimum of 3. And this is all depending on the size of the entity. If it's a smaller property, then it's different. If it's a larger property, then of course you will have as the need arise. So there should be at least one per entrance. Some properties have more than one entrance, so each entrance should have a thermometer so that persons can be checked upon entry. And your staff entrance should also have a thermometer so that when staff getting into work, they can also be checked upon entry. Everybody who enters the property should be checked by the thermometer. If it is a large property, and of course also if you can afford it, then full body thermal scan can be utilized. All right, so it depends on the affordability and the size of your property. But a thermometer should be there that each person who enters your property must be checked, their temperature should be checked. Also disposable gloves, because you'll be using a lot of those, so properties will need disposable gloves. Soap dispensers or hand sanitizing stations. So you could have your stations, your hand sanitized stations, or you could have your soap dispensers strategically placed around the property. So it's always close by that if somebody needs to sanitize, it should not be that you have to go too far away, because the further some persons have to go, then you might just don't worry to sanitize, but it should be closer so that everyone can utilize it as the need arises. Hands-free garbage cans with covers. It's preferable to have the step-on ones that you don't have to touch the garbage can. So your customers, your guests, they don't have to touch. If they need to dispose of their garbage, at least they don't have to touch, because we want to minimize the amount of times that you touch, or the multiple individuals touching surfaces. All right? So that's important. And of course, it should be covered. Measuring device, your tape measure, your yardsticks, your 6-foot pole, because you want to have maintain your 6 feet physical distancing, so you want to have your demarcation. So your measuring device as to what you will need to mark. So areas that you probably have queuing on entry to a building, on waiting in line to probably go do a tour, you want to ensure that you have your signs, your markers, so persons know exactly where to stand. All right? Your indicators, your flags, your markers, your stakes, your cones. Those are very important supplies that you need to have at this time to operate. Tape, stickers, so you might want to tape them. You have stickers, you have signage also. Signage is very important. So signage for protocol awareness regarding your symptoms, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness contact information must be placed so that all can see. So at your property, your customers should see signs that is speaking to your protocol awareness, and so persons are aware what to do, to know that they must wear their masks, hand sanitization stations. All those signs should be clearly displayed. And in terms of the contact for the Ministry of Health and Wellness, those signs should be clearly displayed for all to see as well. It says that supplies are to be provided by your organization, so employees should be provided with the necessary protective equipment to safely conduct their duties. And if an employee is not provided with equipment per these protocols, then violations can be reported to Tourism Product Development Company. So you really should provide the safety equipment for your employees. Provide transportation for employees from central points in the community to the work site and back where feasible. And we know that there might be smaller entities that you cannot provide that transportation, but where feasible, we require that transportation be provided for employees. Communicate with employees that reopening will be gradual. So not everyone will go out, not everybody is coming out this morning, June 15, but in phases, so gradually, because we don't have a large group of persons coming in to our island right now. So the entities will be opened in staggered, gradual stages for employees. And this also will allow for a smoother rollout of the employees and management of training and worker care. So you want to ensure that staff are trained before they start working, and within your entity, you're going to be doing your training. So you want to ensure that it is staggered and it allows for a smoother rollout. And of course, to know what the status of your employees as it relates to COVID. Ensure all employees are healthy upon their return to work using a questionnaire. So there's going to be a questionnaire that you should use, and the same questionnaire that is administered to our potential tourists or other mechanism as appropriate. Check in formally on the health of your employees on a regular basis, every 4 to 6 weeks. So an employee on return to work is not displaying any symptom of COVID-19, temperature is fine. However, you still have to do your checks. Every 4 to 6 weeks, you also check again in terms of just ensuring that they're still not displaying the symptoms and they're okay health-wise. If they show any symptoms, then at this time, testing may be appropriate. And those who test positive are required to be reported to the Ministry of Health and Wellness for quarantine and contact tracing if you test positive. So the testing is if you are displaying any symptoms of COVID-19, then you would be required to do your test. Take the temperature of each employee upon arrival for their shift, which we spoke about already in terms of the temperature check. Those with an elevated temperature or visible symptoms should be documented and screened by an on-site or on-call medical professional for additional symptoms that may indicate a risk of COVID-19. So you see the SPP now comes in handy, because now the SPP would have to deal with this and liaise with the different, whether your local parish public health or the Ministry of Health, but the SPP would now be the point person who would be liaising with the medical professional. Employees are to be briefed at the start of their shift and to remind them to disclose if they have knowingly been exposed to anyone with COVID-19. 2, if they have symptoms of COVID-19. And 3, if they had an above normal temperature at check-in. So at the start of your shift, when you get back into work, these are the questions that you will be asked. And if your answers are yes to 1 or 2 of these, then you will be referred to your SPP, who will take further measures. If it is that you need to be tested, then that would be done. Recommend that all employees change clothes to a fresh set or a work-provided uniform upon arrival to work once they have signed in. So once you have signed in and you get to work, it's either you are wearing your uniform or a fresh clothes, but not what you would have come to work in. It says launder clothing for employees, if possible. So if it is a larger entity that has that facility, that can afford, then if possible, that can be done. So we're not saying every entity is going to be laundering clothes for employees. We're not saying it's a must, if possible. But the clothes should be changed when you get to work, whether it is your uniform or other. So if you wear uniform, ideally it's best to put your uniform on when you get to work. And encourage your employees not to share desks, office supplies, computers, chairs, phones, etc., because you could be transmitted the virus that way. And at the end of a shift, the employee is responsible for wiping down their workstations using your sanitizer. So at the end of your shift, you should wipe your workstation, so the next person comes, it should be a clean, sanitized station that they're operating from. Employees are required to wear masks throughout their work shift and in interaction with patrons. We know the mask is very uncomfortable. It gets hot sometimes, and we're not accustomed to wearing this on our face. But remember, we have to protect ourselves, so that's a requirement to wear the mask, so we do wear it. If you will also have times that you can take off the mask and get some fresh air and breathe some fresh air, because it's not something that you should be, it's not advisable that you should be wearing it for too long a period. And so when you get a chance, you take them off and you get some fresh air. But in your interaction, it's best to wear your mask. Require your employees to sanitize or wash their hands regularly throughout your shift. So at least every hour, you should wash your hands. At least every hour, you should wash or sanitize your hands. And that's why we say sanitization stations, or even just the sanitizer, hand sanitizer, should be strategically placed so you can quickly wash or sanitize your hands as often as possible. Sanitize or wash your hands after you do the following. So after handling of cash, you must sanitize your hand or wash your hands. After processing a credit card from a patron, because that credit card will be touched by several persons, it's suggested that you sanitize. After handling any items from a patron, so you might be doing a tour, you might have to hold items for your patron, or, sanitize your hands after touching the common areas. And if it is an entity that you serve food or drinks, then you sanitize after you do so. The cleaning activities, it says require all cleaners to wear protective. So all cleaners should wear your protective apparel while conducting your cleaning duties. So your mask, your gloves, your disposable apron should be worn when you're doing your cleaning duties. You wash all laundry and reusable items in water at a 60 degrees Celsius and above. So all items should be laundered in water at 60 degrees Celsius and above. Wash all food service items, your plates, your cutleries, your cups, glassware, your trays, in water at 80 degrees Celsius and above. All right? Sanitize all public touch points on a rotating basis throughout the operating hours at a minimum of every 2 hours. So all touch points should be sanitized at a minimum of every 2 hours. So your door handles, your railings, your desks, your flat surfaces, elevator buttons, if you do have that, at a minimum of every 2 hours, they should be sanitized, because those are the areas that a lot of persons tend to touch. All right? Handle waste using your gloves and tongs, and bag your waste properly. And of course, empty garbage as regularly as possible to prevent that kind of overflow. Perform routine maintenance. So if you do have air conditioning units, perform routine maintenance on your vents and filters, so you wash them regularly to promote indoor air quality and limit the exposure of the virus. And if it is that you can operate without the air conditioning unit, then that is fine too. Natural ventilation. So if it is that you can open doors and windows and don't necessarily have to use the air conditioning unit, that is suggested. However, if it is that you cannot, because the building might not have proper, sufficient ventilation, so you will have to continue using your air conditioning unit, then ensure that it is maintained and the vents and filters are cleaned on a regular basis. Doors, so your common areas, your entrances, utilize automatic doors where possible, where feasible, or keep doors open. So you might want to leave the doors open because doors and door handles are what persons touch a lot. So leave the doors open. If it is a case that the doors cannot be left open, then you try to have someone to man the door. So you have someone opening and closing the door each time rather than everyone touching the door handle, if that is possible. But also remember that at least every hour, the door handles should be sanitized. Include signage in clear and visible areas throughout the property, because you also want a visitor to feel safe. You want your visitor to know that you are practicing safety measures, so you want to have the signs there that they know that they're at a safe property. You sanitize, all employees are aware of the protocol. All right, so have your signs there as well for them to know what's going on. Have your 6 feet physical distancing line spacing for queues, and enforce that both inside and outside of your establishment. Have your signs, your marks, so persons will know where to stand. Hands-free sanitizer could be erected, or hand wash stations at the entrance of the establishment, preferably contactless. But if it is that you cannot have that one that is contactless, then you have your sanitizers erected, and of course you also, if it is one that persons keep touching, then you know you have to keep sanitizing that surface, that area, as well as everyone would have touched it. And your signs displaying where your hand sanitizing station is would be appropriate. Now, if you have cases, you report suspected cases or contact with persons with COVID-19 in real time to the relevant authority, whether it is your local health department. And when you are reporting, and more than likely this would be our safety point person who would be making this report, you include your date and time, signs and symptoms observed, age and gender of the person showing the symptoms, and the activities that they engaged in. All right, so you want to know that if you had an event going on and you had 20 persons going on a tour, then you want to be able to say where they went, what time it happened. So if one person from that group is displaying any sign or symptoms of COVID-19, you'll be able to do your checks and your contact tracing for that particular group. All right? And so reporting must occur within 2 to 3 hours of identifying a suspected case. Ensure all employees are familiar and know to report suspected cases or contact with COVID-19 positive persons. And these are the numbers that are the areas that you should know: your parish public health facilities, the Jam COVID website, or the 1-888-1-LOVE contact number that everyone should know. And this information should be posted throughout the property so persons can know the contact. Now, for communications, make Jamaica COVID-19 safety protocols pamphlets available, whether in hard copy or digital format, to those who would like to see what is being done for health and safety. So the general document, the protocol document, can be made available for all to see. So somebody coming into our country, it's good to share with them so they see what we're doing and know as a country how we are preparing for them and our readiness to make the destination safe. We say minimize paper as much as possible. So some of us have digital ways that we can share the information with the employees. It could be a monitor that has the information running as well, so persons can see the information. For paper, if you hand paper to anyone, it's advisable not to take that back from them. So if you hand it to them in paper form, that is theirs to keep, rather than taking it back and reissuing to someone else. It's good to share this information in advance of arrival where possible. So if you know your visitors are coming and you have the information electronically, you could share this with them before they even get here, so they know what we're doing. All right? Also, erect signs on your property, and this sign will detail the procedures which you as the entity has in place and what customers can expect and how can they comply. And also it should include penalties for non-compliance, because you want to ensure that they comply, because you're looking at the health of theirs as well as all your visitors who are there, and of course us, the employees. Now, in sharing this information, we wish for persons to come here, we wish for them to come and enjoy Jamaica, while we are fearful of being exposed to COVID-19, so we have to protect ourselves. But you also want to remind your employees to greet guests with warmth and friendliness. So we still want them to feel relaxed. We want to greet them with warmth and friendliness. And there will be guests that will be asking questions. So employees need to be reminded or instructed on how to remind guests of protocols. So they might be practicing unsafe activities. So you still want to remind them of the protocols of your property, but you try to do so in a polite and respectful manner, all right? Because everyone, COVID-19 is affecting the entire world, so everyone knows. But sometimes when people come on vacation, they tend to be a little more relaxed, and the rules become a little more relaxed, or want it to be relaxed for them. So you also have to keep reminding them of the protocols, but we do so in a polite and respectful manner. Plan and configure activities where possible to be outdoors. So do more of outdoors type of activity, and this allows for the ventilation as we spoke about. So your games, your fitness class, bars, dining, as long as it can be done outdoors, it's advisable to do outdoors to allow for ventilation. In terms of even the usage of water bottle, encourage your guests to bring and use their own reusable water bottles, or consider you can sell those on property. So rather than having persons touching the same water bottle, encourage guests to bring their own, and so they can reuse it, or if there's facility there that sells bottle, then they could buy. It could be a bottle that has it could be a memorabilia from that particular attraction. So minimize having several persons touching the same water bottle or cups. Remind employees to sanitize or wash hands after accepting tips. If tipping is allowed by your property, just remind them that after touching the cash, sanitize your hand. All right? Sanitize your hand after touching the cash. For the entrance also, you determine the adjusted physical distance and the maximum capacity of the attraction or the park. Try as much as possible have persons 6 feet apart where possible. Or also the space. Now, because you have to practice the physical distancing, now you will have to operate at a 70% capacity. All right? So you will have to operate with less persons in order for you to have that physical distancing. So your operations will be at a 70% capacity. And of course, you will inform your customers through signs outlining the new maximum capacity. So for some of the tours, you will now have to operate at 70% capacity. If persons have to stand in line to do a tour, then of course you have your demarcation. You check your temperature of persons before they do their tour. That's when they get onto your property. Those with elevated temperature and visible symptoms, you document that, and they will be moved into designated area for further screening. Of course, you would contact your MoHW to for immediate action. And remove or discontinue, also it says for entrance, you remove or discontinue the use of turnstile, entry gates, as they are prone to frequent touching. So turnstile is something that you have to touch to move around. So we would either remove it or discontinue using the turnstile for now. Post signs that indicate by entering the facility patrons are consenting to health checks, temperature, and maybe ask questions on their travel history and health history. So you share that information with them. The location reserves the right to refuse entry based on the responses to these questions. Identify a separate and efficient approach for processing large group arrivals, including your mandatory checks. So find a way to do so quickly when we have large groups so that we can do so efficiently, because you really want to process them and get them going, get them getting to do their tours. But you also want to ensure that physical distance is maintained, and for queues and arrival from buses or when you're embarking bus. Now also remember that if they're coming as groups or as family members, then the strict 6 feet physical distancing might not apply. So if it's a family of 5, they don't have to stand 6 feet physical distance. But for strangers, it's different. For lockers and storage facilities, you sanitize surfaces of lockers and storage facilities after each tour group, if in batches, or every hour if ad hoc. So after you have a large group and they would have used your locker or your storage facility, then you would sanitize. If you don't have larger groups and you're just running your operations, then at least every hour you should do your sanitization. There should be hand sanitizers installed, or even if it is the bottle, it should be near to the locker area so persons can sanitize their hands before they use the locker, before they store their personal belongings. If possible or if affordable, then you can use your automated lockers or combination locks when possible to prevent the need for keys. Because when you have several persons touching that key, then you stand the risk of transmitting the virus by several touch. So install that. If you have to use the key, then you install a key bin. So persons would drop the key in that key bin or in that box, and then all keys will be sanitized after. For tour guides, you also want to enforce physical distancing for your tour guides from each other as well as from the tourists. So there are some tours that it's going to be extremely hard to have that 6 feet physical distancing, but once it is that you can maintain it, then you do. All right, but I know for some tours it's going to be extremely hard to do that physical distancing. And of course, your SPP should be there to see that it is adhered as much as is possible. Your pricing sheets, as I said, anything that, the paper that we use, try not to reuse. So if it's pricing sheets and so, then if somebody used that, the paper, you would not want to reissue those. So you need to find another way. You could find another way that you could share this information. Signboards, digital media, Instagram, digital app can be utilized. It says disposable pricing sheets can be shared but cannot be reused. So if you still continue to issue in paper form, then it should not be reused. So once you share it with someone, you should not take it back from them. If you have to use pens to sign and so forth, then pens should be sanitized after each usage. Tour guides will be required to wear disposable gloves if physical contact with guests is required. So if you're doing tours that you might have to hold on to your guests, touch your guests, then it is required that you wear disposable gloves. Discourage guides from taking photos using guest cameras or phones. Wear face masks as appropriate as tour guides, and this is as appropriate based on the activity. You know, whether it is a land-based activity or water-based activity. So if it is water-based activity, then you might not want to take all that. But if it's land-based activity, then you wear a face mask. So you wear a face mask as it is appropriate. All right? Each guide should carry your own sanitizer and utilize that after interaction with each customer, including the exchange of currency. So if it could be a tour that you're moving, so you might not necessarily have sanitization stations throughout that area, so it's advisable that the guides will take your sanitizer in your service bag, that you have the things that you need for your tours in your service bag. You pack along your hand sanitizer that you will use as the need arises. You also ensure for your physical distancing where appropriate for your different tours. Individuals in the same party, as I said before, friends or family, you do not need to adhere to strict physical distancing requirements because you're in a family. You're coming together as friends, or doing tours as family members. You really don't need to practice that 6 feet physical distancing. Also, for your videographers and your photographers, you also need to practice your 6 feet physical distancing. And of course, we say the SPP, safety point person, should monitor to ensure that persons are adhering to the protocols. Sanitize your equipment, your cameras and so, at regular intervals throughout the day, at least every 2 hours, because persons will touch, your co-workers will touch, your team members will touch as well, so sanitize as you go along and sanitize your hands before you touch also. It says distribute photographs and videos digitally rather than having to touch these through email or if possible to prevent physical exchange. So WhatsApp or email the photos so you don't necessarily have to do any touching as well. Also, basically, every staff member is required to take their own safety in hand. So travel with your hand sanitizer, walk around with your hand sanitizer, have it in your bags when you're doing your tour. So every interaction, you will be able to sanitize before and after. Rides and adventure sports, continue with your physical distancing if where possible. Wipe down ticket counter regularly after each customer interaction, and throughout the day and with shift changes, you wipe your flat surface and your ticket counters. Require patrons to sanitize or wash their hands before boarding or engaging in adventure sports, activities, or rides. So wash your hand before you board. Enforce 6 feet physical distancing between patrons, individuals or group, if practical and safe. Because we know some of these activities, it's not going to be 6 feet physical distancing. But if practical, you enforce that as much as possible. Your rides, the seats, the boat rides and the other rides that persons would have to sit. Then you sanitize the seats after patrons disembark with your cleaner. So whether it is your boat ride or your ATVs or your dune buggies or your bikes, seats should be sanitized after patrons disembark. Sanitize equipment after each use, your helmets, your gloves, bicycles, all those should be sanitized after each use. And of course, you have an inventory how you manage this. You could also have a numbering system where all equipment is to be numbered and logged when it is checked out, returned, and cleaned. So you have your record of sanitization. Wipe down your water sports ticket counter regularly after customer interaction throughout the day, and always do at the end of your shift change. And we speak about the reusable sheets and the using of the signage boards and your digital apps, etc. All activities should be minimized to 70%. Buffet service as well, when you have your tours, your excursion, even on your excursion vessels, discontinue the service of buffet So require foods to be served by staff. So even on the boats where persons would go and help themselves, you know we'll need to have staff serving the food rather than having your guests touching and helping themselves. So ensure handrails are available for boarding vessels to limit the exposure of crew to help individuals onto the vessel. We know that this is not always the case, but if you can, as much as possible, limit the exposure of touching of your customers, that is advisable. But we know that when you are out at sea and the boat is moving, that might not be possible. But as much as possible, that you ensure that you limit the touching of your customers as much as. And it says eliminate shared water refreshment stations. So you might just have stations that has water or juice. Rather than persons just going and helping themselves, you have someone to share that, to serve them as well, rather than them going and touching. Because everyone touch a bottle of water, then it passes on, it transmits the virus. Sanitize your vessel after each excursion with your alcohol-based cleaner. Now, as it relates to pools and hot tubs, it says, according to the US CDC, there is no current evidence that COVID-19 can be spread to humans using pools or hot tubs. All right? The following guidelines, however, should be practiced, should be followed. Encourage all patrons to rinse off or shower before entering the pool. Require customers to sanitize or wash your hands before entering the pool area using the hand sanitizing stations installed on the pool decks. And of course, remember the 70%, we're now going to be looking at 70% of full capacity. Chairs, umbrellas, huts, rent those under the supervision of an attendant. Right? So the attendant will place the rental equipment within the approved and appropriate 6 feet physical distancing. Sanitize umbrella or the hut after each guest or party use them so the next one will come and get a sanitized seat, umbrella, hut, etc. Allow parties of up to 10 pool goers to be in a single group. So you should not have more than 10 pool goers in a group. If you have a large group that has more than 10, then you would break them so you have 10 in a group together. All right, so you split them in subgroups so you have only 10 in a group, in a party. So if it's a large group that has 20 persons, then you would have two groups of 10. And of course, we say hand sanitizers placed strategically on the pool deck, and your hands-free garbage can for disposal. Physical distancing is required, and of course your beach attendant and your lifeguards would try as much as possible to monitor that and enforce that. But remember, groups of families and friends who arrive together can congregate in the water, but persons who are not a part of that group or not family members, they will need to maintain their distance. Discourage use of face masks in water for children, as they can be exposed to drowning hazard if going in water with their mask on. Consider removing reusable water toys, example, your floating devices, your games, your water trampolines, or ensure sanitization procedures are in place. So you can continue using them, but ensure that they are properly sanitized as you go along. Physical distancing on the water slide by beach attendants, and so you don't have persons queuing up too closely to each other to go on the water slides. Place markers on the ground in areas where they're to wait to enjoy the water slide. And during that time, they wear their face mask while they're queuing up. Sanitize any commonly touched handles or launching points after each guest usage. So where feasible, your launching points or your commonly touched areas, sanitize after each guest use. Sanitize the railing that you would go up to the area that you would launch from to go the slide, and this should be done at least every 60 minutes. Sanitize reusable water slide equipment after each guest, such as your tube, your boards, mats, etc. Those should be sanitized after each guest use. For bathrooms, you have your hand sanitization stations at the entrance to the bathrooms, your floor markers, so persons who are waiting to go to the bathrooms, they would have to stand and maintain that physical distancing. And of course, your hands-free garbage bins with covers should be strategically placed. Turn off your water source for water fountains, including signage, marking them as closed until further notice, because water fountains persons tend to touch a lot. So as it is now, it's suggested that you discontinue using that for the time being and have signs there suggesting that it is closed until further notice. Remove reusable hand towels, so it should be disposable towels that are used rather than the reusable hand towels. However, if you use those hand towels, and they should be laundered at 80 degrees Celsius and above. Sanitize bathrooms regular, at least every 2 hours. Lifeguards are required to wear their face buffs instead of face masks. All right. Require employees working at towel huts to wear disposable gloves when handing out towels to patrons. So wear your gloves when you're handing out, also when you're receiving the towels as well. And discontinue use of towel cards if possible. And then you can identify persons renting the towels by their last name, their room number, etc. Designate a no-touch towel return bin, just like done with the key bin. You can have a no-touch towel return bin where patrons just deposit their towels in that bin without you handling them. When you need to remove the towels to be laundered, then you would use a glove, put them in the garbage bag, tie the bag, and then take them to the laundry to be laundered at 80 degrees Celsius and above. For beach entrance, also, they would be at 70% capacity. They would also need to maintain that physical distancing when lining or queuing to enter the property. And the maximum capacity, the new maximum capacity should be posted on a sign so that persons are aware that it's now at 70% capacity. Temperature of patrons should be checked upon entry as well for all of these attractions. And of course, if any signs or symptoms, then they will be dealt with by the SPP, who will take it to the relevant agency if the need arises. For beach vendors, physical distancing for persons who are selling on the beach as well. So if it is food or they're selling excursions or selling craft, physical distancing also should be maintained. And enforcement should be done by lifeguards or beach attendants to ensure physical distancing while persons are conducting business on the beach. Do not allow any touching by vendors of patrons. And this should be enforced by beach attendants. Do not share excursion menus with tourists, and require the vendor to hold the menu and read or show to the interested tourists, but do not exchange the menu. However, if you have to exchange the menu, fine, if the tourist wants it, because some persons will want to have the document in their hand to read. Remember that once you've shared that with them, you should not reuse those menus after you've shared it with a tourist. Beach vendors should also wear their masks, and they should also take along with them their hand sanitizer, so they sanitize before they have any transaction with a guest, and also after they would have received cash, they need to hand sanitize again. It says each attraction operator is to submit your plans, your operating plans to TPDCo and the Ministry of Health and Wellness for your beach or beach park playgrounds and use of shared water toys, example, your trampolines, floating obstacle courses, floaties, etc. Approval of the operating plans is required for the resumption and continuity of these activities. Once guests have participated in a tour, they should sanitize their hands prior to departure, because you're not going to go back on the bus with all. Also, if there are any towels that were not used, then they should also be returned over after a while. So it's gather on any unreturned towels or left items from guests while wearing disposable gloves. So any collection of towels or any items, you should wear your gloves before you touch any of those, and preferably put them in your garbage bags and tie before you take on to the laundry to be laundered. But while we are operating, we just have to try to be as safe as possible in what we do. And because if we don't practice safety, then of course the COVID will spike and we will be out of business again. So we have to try as much as possible to practice safety so that we can continue with our life and get to go out there and do more of what we do best, and that's welcoming our visitors to our island and ensuring that they have a wonderful time and they enjoy Jamaica's tourism product.
Good morning, everyone. That was a quick demonstration in PPE. Welcome to COVID. Unfortunately, Jamaica relies on tourism heavily. Our first case was an imported one, and most of everything else after that were imported cases. We're not fortunate like the country like New Zealand, who were able to lock off their borders, track persons, and here we are, well, for New Zealand at any rate, 1 month later, they haven't had any new infections at all, or deaths. Well, it is what it is. COVID is here to stay, and we have to live and learn how to work with it and around it, and reduce its effects on us. I'm here today to introduce to you the international protocols that have been developed April and May of this year with regard to resuscitation, CPR, and its use in an aquatic rescue environment. How many of you here use lifeguards? Put your hands up, please. How many of you have staff who must be either lifeguard licensed, or you work at a hotel that its beach must have lifeguards? Put your hands up. Or a tour boat, your crew must have lifeguards. Or tours that go into the water, an aquatic environment, or swim pools. Anybody has swim pools here? Yeah? All right. Well, that lifeguard is considered a high-risk person now. They are that frontline personnel. And you will find, well, let's have another quick survey. How many of you at your facilities have first aid kits? Put your hands up. Let's see them. First aid kits. You know what a first aid is? Do you have first aid kits? Yes? All right. And in that first aid kit, for the past, I know, 20 years now, TPDCo, when they come and inspect, have a nice little checklist and they check these things off. You're supposed to have a pocket mask. Anyone ever seen one of these before? Or if you have one? Yeah? No? Yes? Well, this pocket mask is comprised of a silicone mask, right? It's got a HEPA filter in the middle. So when you deploy it, you open it up like this, right? And then you put on a one-way valve. That way, the air that you're breathing in to the victim only goes one way, nothing comes back. That was created so that you protected the victim from what you might have, and you are protected from what the victim might have. Yeah? Pocket mask. At other facilities, how many of you do diving? Put your hands up. Diving. Yes. And at good dive operations, we expect to see what's called a DAN kit. Yes? A DAN kit on board your vessels as you go out. And also a DAN kit on shore. Yes? And you maintain those things. And in that DAN kit, you will find sound effects. A BVM, bag valve mask. Some people call it an ambubag. That's a brand name. But we who are paramedics like myself and most of our instructors, these are BVMs. These are very expensive bits of equipment. So we expect those water sports operations that have DAN kits, they usually have BVMs with them. We also expect the nurses station. How many of you operate with a nurses station? Put your hands up. You have a nurse? Yes? And if you are at a water park, like Dunn's River Falls, yeah, they have nurses station. Well, a nurses station should have these, along with an oxygen supply and so forth. Okay. How is COVID transmitted? Can anyone tell me? Yes? Say it loud and say it proud. Through droplets. Exactly. So, water vapor, if all of you didn't hear that, through droplets, something produced by us, straight out of the respiratory center of your body, your lungs, right? So when I speak, there's a gas that comes out, right? Or when I sneeze, or when I cough. So what we're trying to do is minimize the effect those droplets have on you and myself. What we're doing today, we wear a mask, right? We have a mask. Some of us have N95 masks. I have a couple in my bag. But in an aquatic situation, it becomes a little more difficult. This is why I started off by speaking about this pocket mask. It is now incumbent, it is now important, it is now a must, it is now recognized that every person who has to perform CPR or resuscitation must have at their disposal a pocket mask. There's no question about it. It has formed part of your licensing, I can tell you, since 1997, when TPDCo started licensing and so on, right? Now, you have to make sure, you have to ensure that your staff has a pocket mask and other PPE, personal protective equipment, that is necessary for their safety at hand. You'll see in the tourism protocols, they speak to performing chest-only CPR on a victim without ventilation. Well, let's analyze really quickly whether that's a safe thing or not. If there is no safety equipment available, lifeguards in Jamaica are duty-bound to perform the rescue. Lifeguards in Jamaica work by, what do we work by? Statute, law. We don't have a choice. If we turn around and say, I'm not saving that man or woman, we're going to jail. It's a criminal offense. So the option's not there. We must have protective equipment. The lifeguard may enter the water and save that person, pulling them back to shore. But what they cannot do is perform rescue breathing whilst in the water. Why? They have no mask, and therefore they are in imminent danger of infection. Correct? Yeah? Make sense? So it is when they get to shore that the other lifeguards and the medical team, their nurse, must be able to greet them there with a face mask, right? Or BVM and oxygen supply, right? Oh, sorry about that. These guidelines that I am reading from come from International Life Saving Federation, Jamaica is a member, International Maritime Rescue Federation, and the IDRA, International Drowning Research Association. These bodies help the WHO to come up with resuscitation guidelines, which are usually measured, usually administered by another international body called ILCOR. And what we've come up with is, well, first of all, to recognize the emergence of COVID-19, sometimes called SARS-2, COVID-19 disease. The virus spreads through the respiratory secretions by touching contaminated surfaces or breathing on. Yeah? So, in your efforts to mitigate this, you have to recognize that in a drowning, which we refer to as a hypoxic event, we need air. You can't really perform CPR without ventilation. It creates for itself an ethical dilemma. Put yourself in the position of that lifeguard. You've just pulled somebody out of the water. The mask hasn't arrived yet. What do you do? Do you sit and wait for the mask? You're watching the person slowly die. Or do you start CPR mouth to mouth without protection therefore assuming the risk to yourself? Or do you say, no, I'm just going to sit here and wait? That's the dilemma, isn't it? Suppose you were the victim. Are you comfortable with that person who has just rescued you now sitting beside you, making that decision? So some of your companies, you might have to, ask your lawyer, are we covered for this? COVID has caused us now to have to concentrate on some of the things we might have overlooked in the past. And one of those things is equipment. We have long since always said, oh, these things come from foreign and they cost a lot of money. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands up right now if the shoes on your feet came from a different country. Yeah? What about the shirt you're wearing? And dare I say, even your underwear? So I think, point made, is that you can source the equipment for your staff, right? Do it. With tourism opening now, I think we could safely assume there's a high possibility that at least 60% of the people coming in may have something. And we have to sit back and say, do we say, no, don't come? Or do we say, come, but we have to make sure we're safe? Another dilemma, right? So, the recommendations I'm making here are not made to disrupt regulation. It's to encourage you to train and train and train and train and practice. If one thing COVID has taught Jamaica is how to wash your hands. Have you considered that? Everybody now knows how to wash their hands. The scary part is, what were we doing before? Okay? We now know about sanitization, and we're learning, same thing. In water rescue, practice is what saves that life. And practicing good protocols. We can find this document that I have here. It's 11 pages long and very informative. And I encourage you, you can get it online and read every page of it. Website is idra.world/COVID. Want me to repeat that? idra.world, WORLD/COVID. It does make mention of performing CPR on a victim, 30 compressions without ventilation. But there are certain mitigating circumstances in that scenario. There are, one, that the facility has no PPE. Two, the victim may be your relative, the person you live with. And therefore it's assumed you're infected too. You decide whether you do it or not. In a water sports situation, The lifeguard, if he performs or she performs that CPR without the mask, assumes the risk. And I may be a little biased if I said, I right now could perform CPR without a mask on any of you. But if you came off a plane right now, I'll have to treat everybody on that plane as an infected person. How can I say that? That's because our local transmission rate is so low, internationally we recognize for that. But the rate of infection of persons coming into Jamaica is very high. So I have to assume everybody I encounter who doesn't live in this country is affected. So I have to make sure I have gloves, I have masks, and I'm prepared. I practice and train. So you folks who employ lifeguards, please, I am imploring you, make sure when those persons are on duty, they have access to your pocket mask that has one-way valve and filter. You must also have a supply of replacement filters and one-way valves, because you can't reuse the filter. Make sense? You'd have to check the manufacturer as to whether the one-way valve can be sterilized. I have not seen it in print yet. So, equip yourself with a supply of replaceable valves, one-way valves, and filters. Most important, okay? And with that, when you get to the website of this information, you will see, apart from the guidelines and the physiology, how it works and why it works, you will see a small demonstration of how to apply, how to use your mask safely, and how to use your BVM safely. You might see online now also small videos of persons performing CPR without ventilation, and they call for putting a towel over the victim's nose and mouth and doing CPR. But you notice that video is of somebody in a house, and if you're the rescuer, that means you live with them, right? So you're also infected. So if you're also infected, give them ventilation. A person whose heart has stopped by reason of water must have positive pressure oxygenation. The only thing that you have to consider is how long that person has been submerged in the water. If they've been submerged for 15 minutes or half an hour, the chances of survival are 0 to nil. But if it's 5 to 10 minutes, you have a chance. Make sure you have the correct equipment and your staff trained and practiced. Now I'll take off this hat and put on one really quickly. Who needs to know when the next NEPR lifeguard examination is? Put your hands up. Please call NEPR. they've been having meetings on when and how, and they're still trying to work out that algorithm. So I'm waiting as patiently as you are. But training from the Jamaica Life Saving Society, you have my contact number, 381-4136. Don't call me after 7 p.m. at night, please. And we can arrange, and we will tell you when the large public training for Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, or Negril will be taking place. And for any of the hotels and so on and so forth. All right? So thank you very much for your patience, and thanks very much for listening. Get online, get this document, and read it all the way through. It's really, really, really important. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fraser. Years of experience here shared with us, and thank you for assisting and making this more clear in terms of the water sporting aspect and the life-saving aspect. Today, thank you so much for attending, and we will continue to work together to make Jamaica a COVID-resilient destination, and in so doing, in our practices, in our operations, try to be as safe as possible. Your safety, your life comes first, so you have to be as safe as possible, and also ensure that your customers and the persons who you come in contact with, your co-workers, practice safety measures also.
Today, I've been watching the workshops online all last week, and pretty much thought I would come to the same thing today, but being an attraction, I said just in case, and I'm glad I came. It was informative, and a lot of what they have put in place are little things that we as Jamaicans have been doing. We're always told to wash our hands, which we have been doing. And small entities, I'm sure, we have been doing a lot of the protocols that they are putting in place. So I've learned a lot today, and I am happy that I came. It is imperative that everyone has the information. As this last speaker said, Jamaica rate of transmission, community transmission, is 0 to none. All of our cases have been imported. So in order to stay healthy, while the sector reopens for economical reasons, for our lifeline, it is important that every Jamaican make it our responsibility to have this information and adhere to it. From social distancing, wearing of the masks, washing our hands. We used to wash our hands, but the Ministry of Health has been doing a great job. We have quarreled with them in the industry over the years that they are so hard on us for the things they want. But most of the things that the Ministry of Health has been insisting that tourism entities have are the things that are being re-implemented in the protocols now. So if it's just second nature, just washing our hands, taking care of ourselves, and realizing it's not just us that we are responsible for, but our families, our communities, and then the guests. Not the guests first. If we are responsible for ourselves, our families, Jamaicans on a whole, all our guests will be fine. So we just have to make sure that we don't get increase in numbers because we are going to be lax because we are opening. This is just a test run to see if we will be able to completely reopen. So I'm hoping that we'll adhere so that in 2 weeks, some of the measures will be lax. Like the mask is the hardest thing for me to wear, but I have to.
Well, today I come to attend the TPDCo training. Well, I learned a lot because I learned about the physical distancing, which I already know, wearing of masks and all that. I also learned that I should sanitize after everything that I do, especially touching money, because where I'm from is a tip allowed company, so you should sanitize after receiving the tips and so on. So dealing with the tourists every day, you know that you sanitize regularly. Instead of, my work involves driving around the cart. So instead of having them come on and touch the goods, I give it to them so they won't be able to transmit anything. Also, yes, it's very important for me to protect myself with the economy opening because I have to go back to my family, and I don't want my co-workers also to catch the virus, and I don't want the tourists either, other tourists, to catch it from me also. So it's very important for me to keep myself safe. Yes.